My doctoral project at this stage, the title as it stands, is Compositions as Experiments Investigating Creative Design as a Composer, Player and Leader in a Small Jazz Ensemble Performance. So my musical output has been birthed in a need to learn, explore, understand and express musical structures creatively, both as compositions and as improvisations. So I am a composer, player and leader of a small jazz ensemble, wanting to advance my practice further, learning to identify methods for writing different scenarios where music is developed, interpreted and built on. So I have accumulated approximately 130 compositions to date, of which 60 have been written since starting this research project. Variations of compositions and numerous ideas developed at either the saxophone or the piano may later contribute to further musical output. But that said, my current direction as a composer is focused on achieving specific outcomes, which are vocabulary extension strategy as a composer, player, leader, and as members of an ensemble, investigating DNA parameters which exist within musical structures, intention, representation, and interpretation of the score. That point I find quite interesting because I find of late, even when I submitted this paper recently, that I seem to think more and more that this project is about that and that alone, and the other areas basically supporting that, but I'll get to that later. Reflections on the contribution and continuation of the ear as inspiration to the overall creative process. So composition is written when musical ideas are transferred from the mind's ear to the page, which is the score. Presented for the ensemble for performance, and as a collective, we interpret what works best for the music. So it's easier to allow this to happen, especially in a small ensemble setting, because the size and shape of the group dictates what one can actually do in relation to the gap between the composer and the performer's interpretation. So this dissertation aims to document my creative activity, to explore properties that exist as a composer, performer and leader in a small jazz ensemble. And in doing so, we'll attempt to break down assumptions and processes. So it's not an exercise just about myself as a composer, but includes the interaction between the players in performance So consequently for this research project, I'm writing compositions as devices to interrogate my primary research question, which is how can I explore artistic activity, expanding my musical vocabulary as a composer, player and leader, and that of the people I'm working with. So the project involves writing, performing and recording of approximately 6 to 9 original compositions as an improvising jazz saxophonist in a small ensemble context, which is obviously the source of my creative practice. So compositions are considered experiments across a continuum, so derived from parameters resulting in various musical frameworks implemented by either a quartet or a quintet. a portfolio of audio-video recordings consisting of studio and public performances, including the rehearsals, scores, photographs. Visual graphs will accompany the written exegesis. Now, the exegesis will include narratives of my practice as a composer, performer and leader, with explorations by my jazz ensemble documented as a participant observer. So phenomenology, autoethnography, ethnography, heuristic inquiry, reflexivity and action research will be used as tools to gather and analyse data in the form of a diary. There are 6 chapters in the exegesis, finalising the methods used, looking at common links, themes and gaps revealed. So as a composer, player and leader of a small jazz ensemble, it is essential to the study and to my creative practice in reviewing procedures and frameworks that occur in music performance. So in terms of influential literature, a considerable amount of literature has been published on jazz composition and improvisation. So I've discovered during my research so far innumerable presentations and definitions on the creative process and associations with the terms composition, improvisation and jazz mentioned in such publications as Jazz by Giddens and DeVoe, The Musical Idea and the Logic, Technique and Art of its Presentation by Schoenberg, Creative Improvisation by Roger Dean, and In Music and the Creative Spirit by Peterson. But for the purposes of this project and this academic document, my understanding of jazz is a genre encompassing a variety of musical influences that allows a space created by the composer in the form of a template for musicians to improvise with, making this type of music scenario unique. So interactions take place where participants are required to make decisions as to the amount of liberty taken between the composer's direction and the improvising musician's performance as arrangers of the compositional material. So illustrating methodology applicable to the development and documentation of artistic practice and content is the performance of jazz composition, I should say, is the work of Nicholas Haywood and his small jazz ensemble. So complexity through interaction and investigation into the spontaneous development of collective musical ideas from simple thematic materials investigates optimum conditions under which collaborative improvised performance can be established. So according to Haywood, this new ensemble was formed as a research project with the purpose of creating new music material, analysing contributions and social dynamics by the improvising musicians and the consequential influence on the author's creative practice. Haywood has surveyed the artistic interactions of the players in the ensemble, which aligns with my own intentions. Fundamental music structures of melody, harmony, rhythm and form used in the moment of improvised music and composition are also found in day-to-day conversation. A line of thought is conveyed, drawing upon a vocabulary of words, phrases and statements as a means of dialogue and correspondence. So Noam Chomsky highlights distinctive inventive qualities found in underlying structure of language as a means of human expression. In Language and Mind, the author refers to the work of German philosopher and poet Karl Schlegel, who found that language is unique in that language as an expression of the human mind rather than a product of nature is boundless in scope and is constructed on the basis of a recursive principle that permits each creation to serve as the basis for a new creative act. The recursive principle, creating composition as experiment across a continuum, is the objective of this study, exploring possibilities which coexist in the constructs of music fundamentals as artistic expression and activity. So in a documentary made in 1977 on Nadia Boulanger, considered one of the greatest teachers of 20th century composition, she describes her aesthetic expectations as well-constructed musical statements, noting that I only hope that a certain approach to grammar and to the form of language goes beyond personal taste. So this comment best sums up an underlying motivation and direction for this project in the creation of new compositional works, expanding my musical language as a composer, player and leader, and that of the people I'm working with, leading to a secondary research question. How can the metaphor of decomposition work as an example in assessing underlying structures or microcosms that occur in the music-making process? So in aesthetic theory, philosopher and composer Theodore Adorno distinguishes between integrated elements and complexities existing in art as also having the ability to disintegrate and collapse, thus contributing to different perspectives in developing artistic practice and product. So in the philosophical science text, The Sciences of the Artificial by Herbert Simon explains rationale for using decomposition as a model for devising and understanding relationships within an elaborate system. So to design such a complex structure, one powerful technique is to discover viable ways of decomposing it into semi-independent components corresponding to its many functional parts. So this procedure of exploring semi-independent components serves as an example for investigation and breakdown of elements that occur in music. The idea of exploring decomposition as creative process can be individual or a collective action. So it's the relationship between the performers, reflective experience, information on the score, and instinctive approaches as individuals and as a collective, which contributes to this unique perspective of arranging and exploring microcosms that occur in jazz composition. In Michelle Mercer's biography, The Life and Works of Wayne Shorter, Shorter reflects on the performances with the Miles Davis Quintet and how decomposition was used as a tool for investigation. Each song has its DNA, so you just do the DNA and not the whole song. You do the characteristics, as cited in the Mercer book by Wayne Shorter. So the essential components. In an engineering conference paper by Hamza and Chen, Learning How to Invent the Use of Functional Decomposition Among Novice Engineers During Solution Development, the authors use the example, model and metaphor of decomposition for investigation and problem solving. This method is applicable for examining parameters and the understanding of interrelationships at work in musical structures, lending itself to the development and creation of new works. Hamza and Chen found that the representation and usage of the words invention and design mirror comparable problem-solving processes where creative design organises complicated structures and expands on conceptions within the scope of invention. Examples of parameters and techniques that may be explored using the metaphor of decomposition as a model for reducing musical structures to their lowest common denominators include analysis and observations of one's own musical work in fundamental music structures and sophisticated relationships of melody, harmony, rhythm, arrangement, form, use of space, and pulse or tempo. Environment as a factor in the development and experience of the composer, musician, and listener. Intuition and intellect as threads to learning and development. The ability to read and improvise, and musical memory and reflection. So as a participant observer, it is hoped that my reflections on the music-making process by members of my ensemble will bring clarity to the study of decomposition as an example, metaphor, and model for exploring jazz composition. By gathering information from two perspectives, that of the performing composer and the interpreting musician, I hope to collect data on how performance of jazz composition unfolds. So what are the processes involved in the creation, development, absorption, interpretation and transfer of material from the score to the performance? So addressing the interactions that occur in performance between the composer and the musician is Ingrid Monson's Saying Something, Jazz Improvisation. This publication looks at musicians' development of ideas with one another, using analogy to communicate intentions not written in the musical score. So the informal, sociable and metaphorical modes of speaking about music favoured by many jazz musicians challenge traditional presumptions about the nature of the musical object and the definition of musical analysis. Monson discovered that interpretation, interaction, relationship, skills and background of musicians involved in a music performance contribute to making jazz composition, performance and listening unique. The activity of music making reflects community and vice versa, informing jazz performance and recording. So how musicians interpret, develop and communicate unwritten aspects of the musical score and performance is documented in Kirsty Guster's Talking the Intangible, contemporary classical pianist on elusive aspects of music making. So her thesis looks into intangibles in modern piano performance, its use, approach, understanding, communication and functionality in music making. The author of this text considers perspectives of the unwritten in the musical score, its dissemination and awareness of this aspect by the musician in performance. She does this by locating and understanding emerging topics and themes, assessing the communication of intangibles, use of metaphor by musicians, and bringing together overall perceptions which have emerged from the collated data of extensive interviews with performing classical pianists. So Gusta's thesis parallels with my inquiry into unwritten aspects of small jazz ensemble composition and performance, examining composers' intentions and musicians' interpretation of the score. So how does the ear contribute and continue to inspire the creative process? So primacy of the ear, listening, memory and development of musical style by Ram Blake, A Composer's World, Horizons and Limitations by Paul Hindemith, and What to Listen For in Music by Aaron Copeland are standout publications contributing to the understanding of the ear at work in the retention, production and recording of musical ideas. So research into the oral component in music making is valuable to this study. The ear informs and provides information to the musical activity. It is where music composition and performance begins and ends. So the ear develops a memory, gaining familiarity and contributing to the next stage in the writing of a composition, the performance follows, and so on. So this is an example of an ontological process at work in the music experience. The triangulation of the composition, performance and listening experience influence and assist each other in artistic exercise. So jazz as experiment. So as a composer, player and leader of a small jazz ensemble, I'm aware of how past jazz masters have influenced and extended their own music vocabulary and that of their band members. Innovations of bebop, in particular the new uses of jazz harmony, melody, rhythm, articulation and phrasing of Charlie Parker have become generic within jazz tradition and vocabulary, influencing generations of jazz musicians. Trumpeter Miles Davis, tenor saxophonist John Coltrane and alto saxophonist Ornette Coleman were all influenced by Parker in some way, yet the classic recordings of Kind of Blue, Giant Steps and Shape of Jazz to Come represent an extension and evolution of bebop language and small jazz ensemble composition and performance. So that leads me to research methods. So knowledge discovery, revealed as tacit knowledge contained and transferred in artistic practice, is presented and demonstrated in this paper in the examples and metaphors of language, decomposition, DNA, intangibles, minimalism, and experiment in music making, framing and contextualizing the examination of creative design and artistic creation taking place in the presentation of my compositions, beginning with the musical idea and writing of a work to its rehearsal and completed performance. So using my working ensemble as a music lab provides a platform and opportunity for developing creative practice, both as a composer, player and leader and the musicians I'm working with who contribute as improvisers in the hope of discovering the best possible outcome for performances of my original compositions. A musical score and set of instructions will be given to the group for performance. At my own discretion as leader, composer and player, considerations will be given as to the amount of freedom allowed for performers' interpretation of the compositional works. That said, the musical framework of the composition, the score, allows musicians involved opportunity to contribute to musical outcomes as improvisers and arrangers of the overall performance and vice versa. It is expected that creative activity involving triangulation of composition, performance, and listening or musical memory as through composed form will be played out in personal relationships, interactions, contributions, and collaborations of musicians involved wanting to develop ideas with each other, using musical imagination to communicate unwritten aspects of musical performance. The key method for documenting the project is the gathering of data in the form of a diary consisting of various drafts, stages of music compositions, experiments, photographs and recorded video excerpts of my creative practice as an improvising saxophonist composer, rehearsals and full music performances. This approach has no distinct separation between the researcher and their object. It is a unique, qualitative, practice arts-based research method where findings are recorded whilst creative process and product is developed into an outcome. So the dissertation consists basically of 6 chapters, the first being introduction and research question, the second one is literature review, research methods, the third is my artistic practice and creative design, fourth being the small jazz ensemble compositions as experiment, fifth being comparative analysis and conclusions. And volume 2 is basically 60 minutes of new music as scores, sound recordings, videos and photographs, and the material consists of various drafts, stages of music compositions, experiments, photographs and recorded video excerpts of my creative practice, and rehearsals and full music performances, collated and presented in hard copy as a DVD and online as a website as additional resources to accompany the written exegesis. Just to wrap up, the aim of this research project and artistic practice as conveyed in Borgdorf's chapter, the production of knowledge and artistic research found in the Routledge Companion to Research in the Arts, seeks to communicate in words the pre-reflective, non-conceptual content. So this content containing creative process and applicable to small jazz ensemble composition is a result of unfinished thinking, not formal process of obtaining knowledge, that is subject matter, but thinking in, through and with art, enclosed in aesthetic experiences, enacted in creative practices and embodied in artistic products. So therefore the experiences, knowledge and methods will continue to be played out throughout the course of the study, encouraging the welcome paradox of reflection, yet avoiding defining thought in any artistic content. So artistic content and product is the chief goal of this study, the written work and performance of approximately 6 to 9 compositions in a small jazz ensemble setting, and the recording of artistic practice in the form of an exegesis. So the artistic practitioner's ambition is to document creative methods whilst developing artistic product in a balanced, coherent approach. So this may be speculative, preempting the process, done in real time in the moment as an observation, and or documented afterwards in a reflexive manner. So that said, it is my ambition that this paper contributes not only to further understandings in the field of music research and artistic practice, but also to the field of performativity, which is considered a connection between performance and document and an ontology of the event preceding and authorizing its documentation, providing both a record of it through which it can be reconstructed and evidence that it actually occurred. So it is a manifestation of this text as language, as a direct result of performance and its description that embodies performativity. It is my intention that this exegetical text, documenting the language and creative design, derivative from the writing, rehearsal and performance of compositions as templates, will bring additional insights and perspectives through my primary research question, how can I explore artistic activity, expanding my musical vocabulary as a composer, player and leader, and that of the people I'm working with. So jazz composers and improvisers explore artistic practice and create a variety of content from different viewpoints due to their personalities, experience, knowledge, methods, environments, and respective instruments. I'm expecting the comparative study from respective outcomes of the literature review, methods used, analysis of creative practice, participant, non-participant observations of my small ensemble practice to reveal variations, interpretations, and unique strategies taken on the theme of small jazz ensemble composition as experiment. I anticipate the investigation of various relationships coexisting in the creation, performance, and reflection of small jazz ensemble composition will point to intuition and intellect as an underlying thread in the creative process. So documenting this practice-led experiment research in artistic creation, reflecting inward on my practice and outward on the perceptions, experience, and knowledge of other practitioners will help in developing my creative design as a composer, player, and leader in a small jazz ensemble performance. I envisage the study to contribute to the assessment and mapping of influential small jazz ensemble composition, writing, rehearsal and performance techniques, having developed from working within boundaries, structures and influences of past masters who provide knowledge and space to transmute ideas and break new ground.